Yes, good. She's good, good. All right, so let me do the share screen right now and be sure that we have everything. We do. Okay, share. Okay, so Fiddler on the Roof has been with us since 1964. It opened on Broadway on September 22nd, 1964, and it was a huge, huge hit from the very, very beginning. There were 3,000 straight performances. It was wildly popular with Jewish audiences, clearly, and with non Jewish audiences from the very, very beginning. It has played all over the world in 40 and 50 different languages, from elementary schools to professional companies. There have been several Broadway revivals, and the show goes on and on and on and on and on. So the question we have to ask, and I've asked myself this question, is what are the factors that has made this show so eternally captivating? Well, first of all, for all of us, I suspect, I mean, it clearly has great Jewish content. I'm going to talk about that Jewish content in some detail as we go on. And I think, and here I'm just surmising, that most of us here in your organization and the people that I deal with, most of us are of East European descent. Some of you may be of Central or Western European, but those of us from East European descent have an immediate kinship with the material sung about and talked about in the show Fiddler on the Roof. But that's not all that has made this show so eternally captivating. As a conservative Jew, myself, born and raised in the conservative movement, I was taught from a very, very young age that the conservative movement is characterized by the statement tradition and change. That's a theme of the early pioneers of conservative Judaism, but the term tradition and change is something that runs through Fiddler on the Roof. We sing about tradition as we observe and participate in change. We observe and participate in that change, in many cases unwillingly. In many cases, that change is imposed upon us. In many cases, that change is imposed upon us by our children, and we who love our children have nothing but to accept the change that the children bring us. Of course, in Fiddler, Tevye accepts the change initially. Some of the change he resists and revolts against. Now, I read very recently, actually I saw a video very recently that claimed that Fiddler on the Roof also has elements that concern the role of women, that concern the role of women and women's liberation. When the three daughters sing Matchmaker, Matchmaker, one of the actors who portrayed one of the three daughters said that that is a song of women's liberation. Is that something that draws you to the show? It doesn't particularly draw me, but then again, I'm not a woman, so I can't relate to that. But this actress who played one of the daughters in a 2015 revival made that claim very, very, very strongly. Of course, we again became very conscious of Fiddler on the Roof in 2018 when the Yiddish version of 2000 on the Roof, Yiddish version of Fiddler on the Roof opened on first off Broadway and then moved to Broadway, and it was a huge, huge success. And I'm going to play you a couple of cuts from the Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof, and with a couple of reasons why I think Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish was especially meaningful. So let's go back to the beginning, if we could. Let's go back to the very, very beginning. And Sholom Aleichem is the author of a series of short stories from which Fiddler on the Roof was derived. Who is Sholom Aleichem? Well, we all know Sholom Aleichem is the Friday night hymn, Shalom Aleichem, that we sing Friday night before we say Kiddush in our homes or in shul. A news reporter by the name of Sholom Rabinovich took the name Sholom Aleichem as his pen name, but his name really was Sholom Rabinovich. He was born March 2nd, 1859, died a relatively young man at age 57 in May 13th of 1916. He was born in an East European shtetl, a shtetl called Voronkiv in central Ukraine, and he started as a teenager writing. As a teenager, he began writing. He was drawn to pen and ink, and he began writing, and one of the first things he wrote was a glossary of his stepmother's sayings. His stepmother had a number of Yiddish sayings, many of them, and this young Sholom Rabinovich wrote a collection of the sayings of his grandmother, and that began his career. He wrote short stories. He was primarily a journalist in newspapers all over Europe. He wrote plays. He wrote novels. He took 2 professional tours here in the United States already in the early 1900s. His short stories became wildly popular, and he got hired. He was engaged to read his short stories to audiences. Let me show a picture of him. This is Sholom Rabinovich, the man who we're talking about, who died unfortunately at the age of 57. He was an impassioned advocate of the Yiddish language as the national Jewish language. That's how he felt, and to be offered equally respect as other modern European languages. He did not stop with what he came to be called Yiddishism, but devoted himself to the cause of Zionism as well. Many of his writings present the Zionist case. In 1888, already as a young man, he became a member of Chovevei Tzion, a Zionist party. In 1907, he served as an American delegate to the 8th Zionist Congress held in The Hague. On his trips here to the United States, he came once, settled in the Bronx, then went back to Europe. And after he was in Europe, he came back to the United States for a second tour where he again was hired to read his short stories. He contracted tuberculosis, and after settling in the Bronx, in May 13th, 1916, he died from tuberculosis. He wrote in his will that he wanted people to gather, he wanted his family to gather, and he wanted his family to, quote, read my will and also select one of my stories, one of the very merry ones, and recite it in whatever language is most intelligible to you. Let my name be recalled with laughter, he added, or not at all. Ironically and tragically, his biggest theatrical success was his funeral. His funeral on May 13th, 1916, drew 250,000 people to the funeral. It was covered in the next day in the New York Times. People lined the streets from his home in the Bronx, through Manhattan, into Brooklyn, where he was buried and where his remains lie to this day. Excuse me, I got that wrong. Brooklyn to New York City and then to Queens. He was buried in Queens, and I'm sure we could, without too much difficulty, find out exactly where that grave is. His most famous creation was Tevye de Milchike. Tevye de Milchike. Now, I'm going to use a lot of Yiddish words here. My Yiddish is not great. I hope some of you have a smattering of Yiddish that will make what we're talking about today a little bit more comprehensible. Tevye de Milchike. Tevye comes from the Hebrew word tov. Tuvya, it is good to be with God. Or his Yiddish name, Tevye de Milchike. Tevye the milkman, the dairyman. And these are a series of short stories by Sholom Aleichem, published in Yiddish between 1894 and 1914. He did write an unfinished play about Tevye de Milchike that was never produced in his lifetime. Now, one of the things that the show Fiddler on the Roof makes us feel is that there is great joy in many of these stories, or all of them, but it's not true. The original Tevye stories were not all happy. They reflect challenges to Jewish life. as I said earlier, tradition and change and challenges, challenges to life in the shtetl, religious, cultural, political, interpersonal. In the show, we know Tevye has a line in the show, I have 5 daughters, but in the short stories, he really has 7. One of them commits suicide. The one that runs off with the revolutionary to Russia comes back. Goldie, his wife, dies long before Tevye dies. And at the end of the short stories, at the end of the whole group of them, Tevye is left alone. My father, Alexander Tilman of blessed memory, comes from this part of the world, and my father loved to read these stories in the original Yiddish. My father shared with Sholom Rabinovich a great love of the Yiddish language. And I remember my father launched into a great soliloquy about the magnificence and value of the Yiddish language at the home of Rabbi Judah Nadich of blessed memory when I was the Chazan Sheni at the Park Avenue Synagogue. We grew up, people of my generation grew up at a time when Hebrew was made out to be the #1 language of the Jewish people. I grew up in a religious institution in Albany, a conservative synagogue called Temple Israel, and the leadership, the religious educational leadership of my synagogue kind of poo-pooed the Yiddish language. Hebrew was the language to be elevated. And my parents, and I'm sure it was similar with your parents, my parents spoke Yiddish to each other when they wanted to tell secrets, And I then had this great antipathy to Yiddish for that reason, because I resented that my parents used Yiddish in front of me to confide in each other, and it was a problem. And so I kind of looked down at Yiddish at that time as a teenager. I was drawn to Yiddish by Yiddish music, by the Yiddish songs, which drew me to the Yiddish language. Now, let's talk a little bit about the show itself. The principals are Hal Prince was a producer, and he hired Jerome Robbins, who was the director of West Side Story in the 1950s. Jerome Robbins, a great choreographer and a great dancer and a great director. His name was originally Rabinowitz. There is a wonderful story of Jerome Robbins when he was on tour for the U.S. State Department in Warsaw, 1959, taking a driver and one of the dancers on this tour to look for his ancestral home east of Warsaw, his father's birthplace, and unfortunately, he did not find anything. Of course, the prime people are Jerome Harnick, Jerry Bach, and Stein. Stein, who had the original, wrote the book, and Jerome Robbins, and Harnick and Robbins, who wrote the play itself, from which Fiddler on the Roof, and was taken, and Jerry Bach, who wrote the music. Now, they borrowed, for their version of Fiddler on the Roof, they borrowed directly from the words of the original short stories. I have in my possession, I've owned it for a long time, this selected short stories of Sholom Aleichem, edited by Alfred Kazin, Kazin. Kazin. This is the book that I've owned for a long time, containing many of these short stories. I want to read to you from an episode in here. And this is from the story of the dream. You know that dream scene where Tevye has to convince his wife that their daughter should marry the tailor, Motel Komzoil. So these are the words, Sholom Aleichem's words. In the beginning, Tevye says to his wife, I dreamt that we were having a celebration of some kind. I don't know what, either an engagement or a wedding. The house was crowded. All the men and women we knew were there, the Rav and the Shochet and everybody, and musicians too. In the midst of the celebration, the door opens, and in comes your grandmother Tzeitel. May her soul rest in peace. Grandmother Tzeitel, my wife shouts, turning pale as a sheet. How did she look? How was she dressed? How did she look, I say? May our enemies look the way she looked, yellow, a waxen yellow, and she was dressed, how do you expect, in a white, a shroud. She came up to me. Congratulations, he said. I am so happy that you picked such a fine young man for your title who bears my name. He's a fine, upstanding lad, this Mottel Kumzoil. He was named after my uncle Mordechai, and even if he is a tailor, he is still an honest boy. A tailor, gasped Goldie. Where does a tailor come into our family? In our family, we have had teachers, cantors, shamoshim, undertakers, assistants, and other kinds of poor people, but a tailor, never. Don't interrupt me, Goldie, I tell you. Maybe your grandmother Tzeitel knows better. When I heard her congratulate me like that, I said to her, what is that you said, grandmother, about Tzeitel's betrothed being a tailor? Did you say Muttel? You mean a butcher, don't you? A butcher named Laser Wolf. Now, these lines are taken right from this collection of short stories in the original language of Sholom Aleichem, the original prose of Sholom Aleichem, and taken in toto into the show. Now, I want us to look at the original Tevye in the movies. And the original Tevye was a man whose name was Maurice Schwartz, who lived from 1890 to 1960, born in the Ukraine, and became an actor. And in 1918, he founded Yiddish Art Theater, functioned for 3 decades. Schwartz performed in Yiddish, English, and on Broadway. He made many movies. In 1939, he made this movie about Tevye. It was shot and filmed in Long Island. Schwartz said that the surroundings looked like his East European home. So this is the first portrayal of Tevye, the Milchika, of Tevye, the milkman, that we have on record as portrayed by Maurice Schwartz. Now, it's serious. This is not a musical, nor is it light, nor is it a comedy. This is very serious. I want to play for you 2 cuts. This is Tevye and his grandchildren washing their hands after Tevye comes back from delivering milk.
Nun, die Kinderler, was machen die Kinderler? Ah?
Weise!
Ai, äußeres Mann! Sehner, Feder! Ai, Gewalt! Ai, was machen sie, bis einmal? Schleumele, Sehner, einiglich meine Teure! Ai, Milch, ich kann noch heie. Dir haben wir aber gebracht, Amatune. Ist? A Bichl,
A Bichl?
Ja,
Verdammt, Tate. Bichlach, Schmiechlach. Wo ist teuge Bichlach, wo ist?
Golde, Brüder, wir haben doch etwas geschmissen, als am anderen Geschäften mischt sich nicht. Ich sag mir im Perek, Scheli, Scheloch, Scheli. Deins ist meins, und meins ist deins.
No, lass mal schon gehen essen. Kim. Bis Chavade hingerig, alle Weich soll liegen.
Hast recht, Mama, wieso steht im Perek? Kim in Kiemer, kein Teure. Mit Makis Essen, nicht mir doch gar durchscannen.
No, Kinder, du ruhig steht
ja, wir gehen zum Tisch, Kinderlach, wir gehen doch waschen zum Essen. Wir waschen zum Essen, und wir werden schön gehen. Wasser sei, wo ich machst, Einike, was machst du? Ja, bye. Ja, babam, ay. 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 Ja, babam, no. Ja, babam, ay. Etcetera.
So I hope you got some of that. I hope you got the rabbinic quote where he says, "Im ein kemach ein Torah." If we have no flour to make bread, then it's impossible to really study Torah. One more clip. This is a very sad one. He is now reacting to the news that his daughter Chava has run off with a non-Jew. Chava has run off with a non-Jew, and he commands his family that Chava is now dead to them, and they must sit shiva for their daughter Chava, who is run off with a non-Jew. So Shabbos is ending. they say good Woch, Shavua Tov, good Woch. They light the Havdalah candle and they go about the procedures of sitting Shiva for their daughter, who's not dead, but is dead. She's dead to them. She is dead to them. Here we go.
Agitevach.
Agitevach. Agitevach.
Nu? Hab mir doch schon mit dem Rabbeini Sholom meistens zerrechnet. Mir meins, und ich ihm seins. Quitt. Als Zindel können wir doch nehmen in unsere eigenen Geschäften. Also wenn Pussig steht, die Ischle vorleu. Nicht du mehr habe. Gestorben habe. Also Shem Nussen oder Shem Lukach. Also ich muss mir sagen, wo dein Name. Jetzt kennt ihr wen.
Oh.
Aber nicht Tevje, Blotte, Tevje winkt nicht. Tevje ist nicht kein Jüdene. Alpidin darf mir das jetzt nicht schieben. Aber nicht mehr wie ein Feinschuh. Nicht mehr wie ein Feinschuh. Aufgesessen. Ausgewähnt sich. Ich hab vergessen. Also wenn Pussig steht, weil ich koche, also wer vergesst hat Teuten. Was redet hat Teuten? Wer hat Teuten, sagt man doch Kaddisch. Wer hat Teuten, hat man doch Jurzeit. Du doch in Scheich in Kaddisch, und du doch in Scheich in Jurzeit. Du doch noch habe, loi suche, loi puppe. Als solche Kinder tun wir nicht auch Mannen, nicht zum Gieten, nicht zum Beten. Loi suche, loi puppe. Ihr Herz ist mir so krach. Der Lummel habe soll mir nicht der Mann werden. Ihr Herz. Gestorben. Du kämen an der Welt nicht gewesen. Gott. Gott, wie bist du, Gott? Wie bist du?
Pretty dramatic, pretty intense, and very, very, very sad. Well, let us go now to the actual show. And as I started to tell you earlier, who the principals were, Jerome Robbins, Bach, Harnick, Harold Stein. These are the people that put together this show. The most important of the creative team was really Jerome Robbins, the choreographer and the director. And originally the show was called just Tevye, but it got changed then to Fiddler and then to Fiddler on the Roof. Why Fiddler? Well, in this book of short stories, there is one of the stories that's entitled Fiddler, and this roof is the symbolism of the precarious or dangerous or balancing act between traditional life and modernity, between the tradition and change, between old values and new. The show is really structured very differently than a traditional musical. The first act ends with a pogrom. Second act begins with a cleanup after the pogrom, and these are not the typical patterns of a Broadway show. It is very important as when you see the movie, that the role of dance is crucial here. Dance advances the plot. Dance happens directly in the story. When Tevye and Laser Wolf make a deal about the marriage of Title, and when the wedding scene, of course, there is dance. The dance is there to advance the plot. There's a wonderful description which I read of Jerome Robbins going to an Orthodox wedding on the east side of Manhattan to see Jewish men, dance, because he needed that information before choreographing the show. Who were the stars of note? Of course, the first Tevye of all of them was Zero Mostel. He was followed by a man whose name was Harry Gaz. Herschel Bernardi played the role. Theodor Bickel played the role over 3,000 times. And then the Israeli Chaim Topol played the role, and Chaim Topol ultimately starred in the movie. Mostel was clearly very, very, very popular at the very, very beginning, although Mostel and Robbins did not get along for certain political reasons. Jerome Robbins had been called to testify at the House Un-American Activities Committee by Senator McCarthy, and Jerome Robbins had named communist sympathizers, and he named Mostel. So Mostel and Robbins feuded all during the time of the show. At a certain point, after Mostel opened the show and was playing the role hundreds of times, he began to ad lib. He began to in Yiddish you say machen besser. He began to make it better, and the original writers and producers did not like Mostel improvising. I want to play for you a cut of Mostel during If I Were a Rich Man, and you'll see what I mean. Now, this appears to me not the actual show. It appears to be a TV special that's talking about other Broadway shows, and Mostel does If I Were a Rich Man. But you see, he doesn't do it straight. He does it tongue-in-cheek and to get a cheap laugh. And this was part of who Mostel's personality was, but ultimately the writers of the show didn't like that. Here we go.
Dear God, you know you made many, many poor people. I know it's no great shame to be poor, but it's no great honor either. What would have been so terrible if I had a small fortune? If I were a rich man, all day long I'd pity bum. If I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard. If I were a pity rich, title man, I'd build a big tall house with rooms by the dozen right in the middle of the town. A fine tin roof with real wooden floors below. There could be one long staircase just going up and one even longer coming down, and one more leading nowhere just for show. I'd fill my yard with chicks and turkeys and geese and ducks for the town to see and hear, squawking just as noisily as they can. And each loud will land like a trumpet on the ear, as if to say, here lives a wealthy man. If I were a rich man, all day long I'd bitty bum. If I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard. If I were a bitty rich, I'd see my wife, my Goldie, looking like a rich man's wife with a proper double chin, supervising meals to our heart's delight. I see her putting on airs and strutting like a peacock. Boy, what a happy mood she's in, screaming at the servants day and night. The most important men in town will come to fawn on me. They will ask me to advise them, like a Solomon was. If you please, Reptavia, pardon me, Reptavia, posing problems that would cross a rabbi's eyes. And it won't make one bit of difference if I answer right or wrong. When you're rich, they think you really know. If I were rich, I'd have the time that I lack to sit in a synagogue and pray, and maybe have a seat by the eastern wall. And I discuss the holy books with the learned men 7 hours every day. That would be the sweetest thing of all. Oh, if I were a rich man, all day long I'd bitty bum. If I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard. Lord, who made the lion and the lamb, you decreed I should be what I am. Would it spoil some vast eternal plan if I were a wealthy man?
If I were a wealthy man, if I were in, we're going to listen to the Yiddish version in a few minutes. We're going to go right now to the movie. The movie that opened in 1971 was a huge hit. Ironically, the director was not Jewish. His last name was Jewison, however, Norman Jewison, and he made it very clear that he was absolutely not interested in Tevia's being interpreted by Zero Mostel. He had no interest in Mostel's improvising the part. He instead was drawn to the Israeli Chaim Topol, and he liked Topol's righteous indignation. He liked Topol's sense of of owning his land, just the way the Israelis own Eretz Yisrael. So too did he want Tevye to feel pride in his small little home in the shtetl of ANATEVKA. The movie was a huge hit. My teacher and my friend, Rabbi Avraham Feder, said to me many years ago, Rabbi Feder said that the movie took a Broadway show and made it into an opera. So here is Sabbath prayer. Sabbath prayer from the movie. Unfortunately, Tevye's back is to us, but we see Golda right ahead of us, and we see the family lighting candles as they are about to begin the Shabbos meal.
May the Lord protect and defend you. May He always shield you from shame. May you come to be in Israel a shining name. May you be like Ruth and like Esther. May you be deserving of praise. Strengthen them, O Lord, and keep them from the strangers' ways. May God bless you and grant you long life. May the Lord fulfill our Sabbath prayer for you. May God make you good mothers and wives. May He send you husbands who will care for you. May the Lord protect and defend. May the Lord protect and defend. May the Lord preserve you from pain. May the Lord preserve you from pain. Favor them, O Lord, with happiness and peace. For hear our Sabbath prayer.
Now, just a word about the music of the show in general. A lot of the songs of Fiddler that we know and love use synagogue materials, use synagogue modes, synagogue scales. If I had a piano here, I could demonstrate that to you very, very clearly. But the use of those scales, the use of those modes that we hear in shul for this show are one of the things that make the music so immediately accessible. Not every song. This last one, in the Sabbath prayer, it was apparent that Chaim Topol used the cantorial line at the very end, a little bit of, we call it in Yiddish, a durée, a turn, a little bit of a cantorial flavor when he ended the Sabbath prayer. And those little hooks, those little musical hooks occur throughout the show. Not every song. Wonder of Wonder, Miracles of Miracles has no particularly Jewish flavor to it, but Sabbath Prayer, Sunrise, Sunset, If I Were a Rich Man, these songs immediately call to mind Jewish music because of their use of certain musical materials. Now, one of the creative forces in the movie was the great John Williams. Now, he, at this point, was rather unknown. John Williams later went on to compose Superman and E.T. and all the Harry Potter scores, and a great composer, a great conductor. He was responsible for being the music director of the movie here. He adapted the music from the Broadway show for the movie, and he began his career as a great conductor here with the Fiddler on the Roof. Let's go on. Now, we want to talk about the Yiddish show, which opened in 2018. And I'll just play a little bit of the Yiddish version of If I Were a Rich Man. It's entitled, Wenn ich bin a Rothschild. If I only were a Rothschild, if I only were a rich man like Rothschild. The star here is Stephen Sky Bell. I won't play the whole show, the whole cut, but to my ears and my understanding, the Yiddish makes the show much more Jewishly frum, makes it much more religious in the terms of the language that it uses. Here is If I Were a Rich Man, Wenn ich bin a Rothschild, sung by Stephen Sky Bell from the Broadway version of the Yiddish version of the Broadway show.
This is Yiddish.
Rabbeinu Shalom, hast doch beschaffen a Welt mit armen Leut und weiß ich doch, es ist gar nicht kein Schande zu sein ein armer Mann. Aber a größer Cover ist das euch nicht. Was wollt gewinnen so schlecht, wenn ich wollt ja gehabt a kleine Oizer.
Kleine Oizer.
Wenn ich bin a Rothschild, ja, bum. Ganze Tag wollt ich sicher wie die Bum. Wenn ich bin a reicher Mann.
Reicher Mann.
Hand in kalten Wasser. Nicht reingetan, bum. Gewollt gehad a Deidelbeitel Geld und gewinn a Seidel Edelmann. Und gewollt mir aufgebeut a Haus wie a Palaz darf gehen mitten von der Stadt. A scheinem Dach und a Käumen was bloß da reich. A lange Trepp von Holz wird laufen a Reif, a zweiter noch länger läuft ab. A dritter läuft, ich weiß noch nicht wie hoch. Und es wird mein Häuf sein voll mit Katschkes und Gänse, die Sonne marsch platzen soll sein. Von dem Krähen wären die euren Mied. Und jeder das heißt jeden, ich hab gelegt, nein. Und es heißt noch, als da wohnt a reicher Jid. Wenn ich bin a Rothschild, ganze Tage wollte ich sich mit die Bum. Wenn ich bin a reicher Mann, Hand in kaltem Wasser, nicht reingetan, wie die Bum. Gewollt gehad a Deidelbeitel Geld und gewinn a Seidel Edelmann. Oh, diese meine Weib, mein Gold, sehr schön ausgewirrte, geht mit der Geure, mit der Beuch. Macht der Zimmes, starr in der Prostentag. Sie wischt dem Schweiß und sie blotzt sich, geht schon wie ein Paar und es geht von ihr reich. Chappen alle Diensten, bald der Jung. Und jeder Gewirr in Stott wird kommen zu und fragen mir. Punkt wie bei Schleume Hamele. Geht ein Eizer mir ich bett. Kratzt die Bord, Reptevie. Sagt da Wort, Reptevie. Auf die Scheile seucht der Rob, die Pei ist dreht. Bye, 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 bye. Sie's was sei kein Schum aufgemeinert, sie mein entverhottet haben. Wenn sie's reich, versteht Chasones euch. Wenn ich bin reich, hab ich sich Zeit und ich geh 3 Mal a Tag in Schule rein. Und ich kauf mir Stott bei der Misrachwand. Und Ich lern Schachs und Poskin mit die frömme Jiden. Gott denn ju, wenn wird das sein? Efter nur in unser heilig Land.
I'm going to end this here because I have some video clips from the Yiddish show itself, and I want you to see both the video and the audio, and in a short medley of the Yiddish Fiddler.
Sugar, ne?
Okay.
Wer Tag und Nacht, was muss ich mir denn klagen? Gaben jeden Morgen, bringen Bräuter heim. Und wer hat das Recht zu sitzen nebenan und haben euch das letzte Wort? Der Tate, Tradition, der Tate,
Kinder halten auf der Scheuß, Kede der Tat ist frei zum Gehen in Schul. Die Mame, Tradition, die Mame, Tradition. In Cheder Agayori,
Kommt her. Look, I'm going
to skip. This is a little hard to hear for some reason. So I'm going to just jump to the next one, which will be immediately understanding to you. So the Fiddler has become part and parcel of our culture, of our universal culture. And a very funny episode took place with a man who right now is very, very, very famous, the great Lin-Manuel Miranda, the man who wrote Hamilton and who wrote the show that is now playing Washington Heights, In the Heights. In 2009, Lin-Manuel was relatively unknown. He was already appearing in the Heights on Broadway when he himself got married. And he wrote that he searched the Broadway canon to find a song that dealt with the father-in-law, and the only one he could come up with was a show from Fiddler on the Roof. Now I'm going to guess that in Lin-Manuel's wedding, there were not too many Jews present either as guests or in the wedding party. But this is what Lin-Manuel Miranda and his father-in-law did in honor of his bride, his own bride, at his own wedding in 2009. Vanessa's wedding to Lin-Manuel Miranda. This is really happening now in 2009. This is not an act.
And I want to thank you all for being here, all our friends and family. And I know, Lynn, you're not expecting this, but I think you can help me toast all our friends and family. So please come up and join me. Come on, don't be shy. You've been here before. Well, how should I start? Well, we all want money, so here's to our prosperity.
To our health and happiness.
And most importantly, to life, L'chaim, 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 to life. Here's to the father I tried to be.
Here's to my bride to be. Drink L'chaim to life, L'chaim. L'chaim, L'chaim, life. Life has a way of confusing us,
Blessing and bruising us.
Drink L'chaim to life. God would like us to be joyful even when our hearts lie panting on the floor.
How much more can we be joyful when there's really something to be joyful for?
To life, L'chaim.
Vanessa, my daughter.
My wife! Something to think about.
Something to drink about.
Drink L'chaim to life. Rep Danny, Rep Sarah, drinks for everyone!
What's the occasion?
I'm picking myself a bride!
Who's it to be?
Frank's daughter, Vanessa!
Mazel tov to Lynn Manuel to Frankie. Vanessa, your daughter.
My wife!
May all your futures be pleasant ones, much like our present ones.
Drink L'chaim to life, L'chaim. L'chaim, L'chaim to life. It takes a wedding to make us say, let's live another day. Drink L'chaim to life.
Raise a glass and sip a drop of schnapps in honor of the great good luck that favors you. We know that when good fortune favors two, such men it stands to reason we deserve it too. To us and our good fortune, be happy, be healthy, long life. And if our good fortune never comes, it's to whatever comes. Drink L'chaim to life.
Heaven bless you both, Nastarovia, to your health, and may we live together in peace. Nastarovia, heaven bless you both, Nastarovia, to your health, and may you live together in peace.
May you both be favored with the of your voice. May you live to see 1,000 reasons to rejoice.
We'll raise a glass and sip a drop of schnapps in honor of the great good luck that favors you. We know that when good fortune favors two, such men it stands to reason we deserve it too. To us and our good fortune, be happy, be healthy, long life. And if our good fortune never comes, we do whatever comes. Drink L'chaim to life! To life!
Not too many Jews, I don't think, in that wedding party, but they certainly used to life, L'chaim, to toast the bride, and it shows that the power of the score and the power of the sentiment in that show to express our most sincere and most profound feelings. Jerome Robbins said, "The show is about the dissolution of a way of life." Yes, that's it. It's tradition. We have to establish the traditions at the beginning, and then the audience will see how they are breaking down. That's the show. And so Fiddler on the Roof goes on 50 and 60 years after it opened. It is as powerful today as it may be more powerful today than it was when it opened, and we can feel nothing but great pride in this part of American culture, not just Jewish culture, American culture and world culture. So I want to conclude with, from the movie Sunrise, Sunset, because it is so vivid and so powerful and so true to detail. The hats they're wearing, the role of the rabbi, the holding the candles, all so traditional in East European life, Jewish life. And with this, I will conclude, and we can then open this up for questions or alternate comments as you wish. Sing along. Don't feel shy to sing along.
Is this the little girl I carried? Is this the little boy at play?
He takes the cup, gives it to the bride.
I don't remember growing older. When did they?
When did she get to be a beauty? When did he grow to be so tall?
Wasn't it yesterday when they were small?
Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly flow the days, sailing strand over night, the song flows, blossoming even as we gaze.
Raise the wolf.
Sunrise, sunset, swiftly fly the years. One season following another, laden with happiness and tears.
What words of wisdom can I give them? How can I help to ease their way?
Now they must learn from one another, day by day.
They look so natural together,
just like two newlyweds should be. Is there a canopy in store for me?
Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly fly the years.
Mazel tov.
And that's it. So I would suggest you, if you want to really enjoy something beautiful, order the CD, the music of the Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof. The songs are resung beautifully with beautiful orchestration, and the Yiddish language is just sparkling. Any questions, comments, or alternative speeches? Glad to hear from you.
Now that you have us all in tears, all verklempt. First of all, I want to thank you all for that beautiful presentation. I don't know if anybody has questions. I mean, right now that song has me in tears.
Not a question. I want to Dick Steinbrink.
Rabbi, good to hear from you. Good to see you.
Thank you for a wonderful program.
Wonderful.
We saw a documentary film about the making of Fiddler some years ago. And one fact stuck with me for all these years, that since the day it opened in New York, there has never been a day that Fiddler hasn't played somewhere in the world.
Right. That's it's profound. That's profound. It touches people on all kinds of levels. There is I think it's available on Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon Prime as an app on your smart TV, there is a movie about Fiddler on the Roof that shows clips of the show in Japan. That shows clips of an elementary school production in Bedford-Stuyvesant, in an all-black neighborhood in Brooklyn, that created a lot of tumult when it opened. But the show goes on and on and on, and it just touches people profoundly.
It's on it's on Netflix until June 30th. The show is on Netflix and only until June 30th.
Okay, thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you
Pearl?
for a wonderful presentation. I haven't smiled so much in such a long time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And if you raise your hand, it's easy. Anybody else?
I just want to say, I think most of us have probably seen more than one version of Fiddler. We've probably seen it a number of times, and it is something that will live on and on. You know, wherever I go, you know, there's some song from Fiddler that comes on, and I always find myself just wanting to snap my fingers and dance along with all of it. So I hope you all enjoyed that today.
Remember what I mentioned earlier, that you can really divide the shows, divide the songs in two broad categories. There are the songs that have these authentically Jewish musical elements, modes, rhythms, and there's songs that are just Broadway show type songs that are different. The ones that stay with us, of course, are the ones that have these Jewish musical elements. Those are the ones that immediately touch us profoundly.
Cantor Tilman, it's Diane Steinbrink. I saw the Yiddish show in New York.
Right.
And Joel Gray was the director, and most of the cast did not know Yiddish and had to learn it for the show, because many of them were not. And they translated the show in a very clever way on curtains on either side of the stage. So when you heard the Yiddish, the translation was on the curtain to the right or the left of the stage, and people could know then what they were singing or what the lyrics were. It was beautifully done.
Right, so I was told. Zalman Mlatek was the music director, and he's a colleague of mine whom I know well, and I talked to him about the show. We had signed, for our third Sing Hallelujah concert at Verizon Hall, we had signed the stars, Stephen Skybell, and who plays Tevye, and the young woman who played Golda. But of course, the show got canceled. And if we mount it again, and if we can get that far again, it'd be nice to bring them back. But Mio Dea, Verves, who knows what will be. But everybody tells me that that the
Thank
show.
you for a wonderful program.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have a lot of words in the chat if you're seeing them.
Yeah, I'm gonna look.
Razan.
Yeah. Great.
Are there any more questions or any more comments?
A lot of the comments are in the chat.
Yeah, I see that. Wonderful afternoon. Thank you, Cantor from Sandy Fryer. Thank you so much for such a wonderful uplifting program. Liz Downing, Ann Pollock, thank you for a very wonderful program. And I'm sure that everyone is thinking that right now. Cantor Tilman, it was wonderful. We thank you for bringing a smile to all of our faces and all of the familiar songs to us. I think some of us were singing along.
Great. Good. All right. Have a wonderful summer, everybody. Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Enjoy the mountains. Enjoy the mountains.
Right.
Right. You see the trees? Can you see the trees behind me? You see all the trees back there?
Yeah. And Ellen is a life member. His wife is a life member of National Council. So.
Right.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for coming. And this was our closing program. Look for us. We may have something in the summer to entertain you. But otherwise, as the words to the song go, see you in September. See you in September, everyone. Be well. Have a wonderful summer.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now. Thank you again, Cantor Tilman.
My great pleasure.
Thank you. Ellen.
Hey, Ellen.
Hi.
My wife.
Hi, Patty.
Ellen. Hi, Ellen. Enjoy the mountains.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll get your text.
Okay.